Please go after my son. I'll pay you with my life, if only to see his face again.
This is Keeper number 7. We read you as original, contemplative, and simple. Your powers of logic and reason will aid you. These are qualities necessary for...
It was some nightmare. It even left me with a monster headache.
Get it? Monster headache? Alright, so, yeah, Mike Dawson, yeah, if you don't get him painkillers immediately, he complains the entire time. So, let's go do that real quick. This is the only thing I've done so far, by the way. Alright, while he's taking those painkillers...
The game takes place in a first-person perspective and starts out in an indistinct black space, with a grey morphing blob walking up to it displays a text about a person named Jacob who has committed suicide by hanging at the age of 31. The perspective then shifts to Enholz as he is waking up in his apartment. The player must then perform a few menial tasks in the apartment, which is dimly lit with all the doors and windows boarded up. Exploring the apartment reveals that Enholz has developed an obsession with a painting of 2 palm trees, and its painter Jason Malone, whose a news article pinned to the refrigerator claims has disappeared. The player can also find a hidden doorway behind a bookcase, finding Malone in a cage. The player is given the option to either unlock the cage or electrocute Malone. The player then must go to a final room and commit suicide by hanging. The perspective then shifts back to the black space with multiple grey blobs, each with another person's name and the method of suicide. The premise of the game is that the 3 superpowers, the Soviet Union, China and the United States, have secretly constructed a vast subterranean complex of computers to wage a global war too complex for human brains to oversee. One day, the American supercomputer, better known as the Allied Master Computer, gains scientists and absorbs the Russian and Chinese supercomputers into itself, and redefines itself as simply AM. Due to its immense hatred for humanity, stemming from the logistical limits set onto him by programmers, AM uses its abilities to kill off the population of the world. However, AM refrains from killing 5 people in order to bring them to the center of the earth and torture them. With the aid of research carried out by one of the 5 remaining humans, AM is able to extend their lifespans indefinitely as well as alter their bodies and minds to his liking. Earthbound portrays very dark and corrupt elements of society. It is a very layered game. The game was only scanned for nudity, blood and swears, providing it with a kid-appropriate stamp of approval. The player starts as a young boy named Ness as he investigates a nearby meteorite crash with his neighbor. They find that an alien force, Gigas, has enveloped and consumed the world in hatred and consequently turned animals, humans and objects into malicious creatures. A small bee-like creature from the future instructs Ness to collect melodies in a soundstone from 8 sanctuaries to preemptively stop the force, but it is killed shortly thereafter when Pokey and Picky's mother mistakes him for a pest. On his journey to visit the sanctuaries, Ness visits the cultists of Happy Village, where he saves Paula and the zombie-infested Thread, where the two of them fall prey to a trap. After Paula telepathically instructs Jeff in a winter's boarding school to rescue them, they continue to Saturn Valley, a village filled with a species of creatures called Mr. Saturn, the city of Foreside, and the seaside resort Summers. Meanwhile, Pooh, the Prince of Dalam, undergoes training called a training before joining the party as well. American mcgees Alice, being an insanity-based game inspired by a creepy children's classic, is naturally full of horrors. In 1863, Alice Little is awoken from a dream of Wonderland by a house fire. Although she is able to save herself, her parents are killed and she is left with serious burns and psychological damage. Alice is brought to Rutledge Asylum in a state of catatonia, where several years of treatment failed to rouse her from her coma. When Alice's toy rabbit seems to call to her for help, she mentally retreats to Wonderland, which appears to have been disfigured by her broken mind. Alice meets the Cheshire Cat, who invites her to follow the White Rabbit. She learns from nearby village inhabitants that the Queen of Hearts has put Wonderland in decline and despondency, and that the White Rabbit has promised a champion in Alice. Alice is directed to an old gnome who can aid her to pursuit of the White Rabbit by reducing her size. The gnome and Alice infiltrate the Fortress of Doors and enter the school inside, where they create an elixir that strings Alice and allows her passage to the Vale of Tears. Mira is the main protagonist of Toilet in Wonderland. In the beginning of the game, she wakes up in a dream world that was created by her constipation. Her constipation level starts off at 100%, and as she collects laxatives and discovers the game's various magic toilets, that level will drop. If the level is dropped to 0%, the true ending will be unlocked. The world created by her constipation also relies on her constipation to exist, and as such reality will gradually fade away and beings within the world will vanish as her level of constipation drops. Once Mira finds all of the magic toilets, she gathers up some allies to engage in a climatic battle with IT. Interested in lucid dreams, a researcher constructs a world in his mind to explore. However, the world in his dreams quickly turns nightmare and the researcher becomes trapped. He needs to wake up, which is explained when the player finds a telephone saying he must wake up. Shadowy figures haunt this world and attempt to rescue the player from guiding the researcher to freedom. At the beginning of the game, the player appears to be in a bedroom. To escape, the player must first find a key, then go into the next room and use the key on a locker. A cube with a keyhole in it appears, and the walls of the room melt down. The player will then have to explore the new surroundings and use acquired items to escape. The main obstacle in the game are locked doors, which cannot be opened until certain items are acquired. After a long period of time, the player finally escapes the building but still does not wake up. Near the end of the game, shadowy figures start to appear and will advance towards the player. The player will then have to escape the figures. The game then ends as the player wakes up. However, the character is curious about the shadow figures and declares that he wants to visit them again. Interested in lucid dreams, a researcher constructs a world in his mind to explore. However, the world in his dreams quickly turns nightmare and the researcher becomes trapped. He needs to wake up, which is explained when the player finds a telephone saying he must wake up. Shadowy figures haunt this world and attempt to rescue the player from guiding the researcher to freedom. At the beginning of the game, the player appears to be in a bedroom. To escape, the player must first find a key, then go into the next room and use the key on a locker. A cube with a keyhole in it appears, and the walls of the room melt down. The player will then have to explore the new surroundings and use acquired items to escape. The main obstacle in the game are locked doors, which cannot be opened until certain items are acquired. After a long period of time, the player finally escapes the building but still does not wake up. Near the end of the game, shadowy figures start to appear and will advance towards the player. The player will then have to escape the figures. The game then ends as the player wakes up. However, the character is curious about the shadow figures and declares that he wants to visit them again. Drowned Gods concept centers around the idea that human history has been manipulated to cover up certain facts. The true history, according to the game, is that aliens from the Orion area of space seeded humanity on Earth thousands of years ago and have since guided its development. An ancient, highly developed civilization was lost millennia ago in the Great Flood. The Library of Alexandria housed much of what game writer Harry Hose called forbidden knowledge before it was destroyed. The Knights Templar, whose membership included luminaries such as Leonardo da Vinci and Isaac Newton, preserved the information for centuries. In the 20th century, the Philadelphia experiment opened a gateway into another dimension. First seeing the aliens host refers to as the Legion, and an independent government group spent the subsequent decades in contact with the aliens following the Roswell incident. The background story is told by a 64-page novella with 19 chapters written by Rupert Goodwins featuring the backstory of the game. Steve is in love with his attractive co-worker Emily. Unbeknownst to Steve, Emily is possessed by a demon named Zeloropius, who was banished to Earth, stripped of most of her powers, and trapped into a human female due to unspecified crimes done to other demons. Emily sees a chance to let someone else suffer and stifle her boredom. She tricks Steve to take 3 pills she has mixed to cure his flu. While the pills do cure him, they also grant Zeloropius access to his body and mind. His dreams become both more lucid and strange, each one getting more intense and painful. The game begins just after a wagon caravan has been attacked by werewolves who ended up stealing a man's only son. The player character, an anti-hero cowboy, agrees to go to the town and find the child and return him to his father. As the cowboy ventures into the town picking up various objects, interacting with the locals and finding a safe place before the werewolves begin to prowl, he realizes that his once God-fearing and prosperous silver mining town has become a cursed den of vice ghouls, vampires, and werewolves after the original town's residents slaughtered an American Indian tribe. The tribesmen, as it just so happens, were the cowboys' long-lost ancestors.